Tonight on Mississippi Insight, the start of the session. Lawmakers return to the Capitol, what's been accomplished already, and what we can expect to be passed in the next few months. But first, Congressman Michael Guest. After his first year in office, he joins us in the studio to talk about the conflict with Iran, impeachment, and what can be accomplished in an election year in a divided Washington. All tonight on Mississippi Insight. Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. Today we are joined by 3rd District Congressman Michael Guest. He just wrapped up his first year on Capitol Hill. He joins us right before he heads to Washington. There are many issues to get to, but what's going on with Iran will likely take center stage. First, your response to the news about the airstrikes against killing Soleimani. A number of Democrats are really on this issue. What's your thoughts on that strike?
You know, I think when you look at Soleimani and the things that he did, the number of Americans that he has been responsible for participating in their deaths all the way back now for more than a decade. In numbers I saw as many as 600 American servicemen whose deaths he was responsible for. The recent attacks on our embassy were believed to be led by him. And so I believe that the president had information that he felt was actionable, and I believe that the world is a better place without General Soleimani in it. I believe that ultimately our troops overseas will be safer. The individuals, the men and women that man our embassies will be safer knowing that he will no longer be able to threaten them and no longer be able to cause American casualties. And if you look at Iran, you know, they have been sowing chaos in the Middle East since the days of President Carter, when they captured our Americans there in our embassy. And you look at decade after decade, they continue either directly or indirectly through proxy groups that they fund to cause chaos in the Middle East. And I believe that the president finally said, look, we have got to do something. We have got to set forth a firm, strong message that we are not going to allow Americans to be targeted and that we're not going to allow our embassies to be attacked.
Will this dominate the next year, do you think, as we go into this election year?
Well, you know, I think you're going to look at what is happening in the Middle East, and then you're also going to look at impeachment. I think that those are going to be the two overriding issues that Congress is going to be grappling with, at least for the first half of the year. You know, I was pleased that at the end of last year we were able to finally pass out of the House USMCA a major trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. That trade agreement is expected to add over $60 billion to our economy nationally. It's expected to create over 176,000 new jobs. And so I was excited to see that out of the House. I am hopeful that the Senate will quickly take up USMCA. The President has already said that he is willing to sign that once that bill passes the Senate. But I believe out of USMCA, that is really the only major piece of legislation that I see Congress being able to pass, at least within the first couple of months of the year. As we move into impeachment, as we have a trial in the Senate is going to be focused exclusively on that. That trial could take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks all the way up to 6 to 8 weeks. And so during that time, it's going to be very difficult for legislation to move out of the United States Senate.
What long-term impact will the impeachment have going forward?
You know, I think short-term, I think is going to make it very difficult for Republicans and Democrats for the House and Senate to work together. I think until the impeachment hearings are concluded and it is finally put to bed, I think that there will continue to be a rift, particularly between the parties, because if you look at impeachment, the vote to go forward on the articles of impeachment, it was a strictly partisan vote. There was not one Republican who supported impeachment. There were actually 2 Democrats who did not support one article and a 3rd Democrat who did not support the 2nd article. And so you're looking at a very partisan situation right now. I think with Speaker Pelosi having made the decision without consulting Congress that she is not going to send those articles over immediately, which violates not the law, but it violates precedent that has been set in other impeachment proceedings. Again, I think that goes to continue to polarize the impeachment proceedings. And so until these proceedings are concluded, I think that there will be an impact on us being able to pass legislation and us being able to do the jobs that the American people sent us to. They sent us to Congress to work toward passing legislation that is going to improve the lives of everyday Americans. And I think the impeachment proceedings do make that more difficult.
Can anything be accomplished this next year that it's an election year and you have impeachment and now the Iran situation? Do you think anything can be accomplished next year?
I'm hopeful that it will. And again, I don't believe that we're going to be able to accomplish anything substantial until after impeachment is over. But we still have major issues that need to be addressed. When we were elected, many of us ran on the fact that we wanted there to be an infrastructure package passed out of Washington, D.C. That because of our aging roads and bridges and water and sewage, that we need to have the federal government, the state government, and the local government all working together so that we could repair our aging infrastructure. We need to work on things such as rural broadband. We need to work on strengthening things such as our rural hospital. I'm proud of the fact that when we were home for the August recess, that myself and Congressman Thompson came together to hold a bipartisan rural health care summit where we brought in shareholders from across the state to talk about the needs that are specific to our rural hospitals. I was surprised to learn that over half of our hospitals in Mississippi are suffering from severe financial strain, to the point that many of the hospitals that many of our Mississippians visit each and every day may have to consider closing their doors. And so there are major issues that we need to address in Congress for the people of Mississippi and the people of the United States.
Here in Mississippi, the biggest issue over the last week or two has been the prison system here in the state. As a former prosecutor, what do you believe it needs to be, how we need to address the issues and the riots that have been happening within our prison system?
I think what we need to do is we need to look at reinvesting back in corrections. We had a move several years ago when I was still a prosecutor in which sentences were reduced to alleviate some of the overcrowding in the prison. At the time that legislation was passed, there was also supposed to be a component that would deal with things such as job training in prisons, deal with things to make sure that people who were incarcerated had access to school, GED programs, college credits, drug and alcohol. There were supposed to be transitional beds so that we can transition people from incarceration back into the public life. And I believe that we've not done a very good job of prioritizing those programs. We continue to do a good job of keeping people locked up, but we're not providing them the skills, we're not providing them the avenues to be successful when they get out. I think that whoever is going to be taking over as the new Commissioner of Corrections needs to immediately also look at evaluating the system from top to bottom. I will tell you that those individuals who work within the Department of Corrections are sorely underpaid. We need the legislature to immediately address the pay scale so that we can continue to pay those men and women who are in those difficult jobs a living wage, the wage that they deserve. And so I hope that this will be something that the state legislature, who will be meeting this week, I hope that they will immediately begin to take up this issue and again see where we can look at reinvesting back in our correction system so that we are doing a better job on the rehabilitation side.
Your colleague, Congressman Benny Thompson, is calling for a federal investigation of the MDOC and the prison system. Do you support that, or do you believe there needs to be one at all?
At this time, I do not. I would like to wait and see, first of all, what the new Commissioner of Corrections does once he or she is appointed. I'd also like to look and see what the Mississippi legislature does. But if these problems continue and this becomes more of a long-term issue, it might be something that I would consider joining Congressman Thompson in support.
What did you learn from your first year in Congress and your experience in the first year in Congress?
I was very blessed, Byron, to come in. First thing I did was I tried to hire a staff of individuals, young men and women who had experience in Washington to kind of help guide me through. As someone who had served his whole life as a prosecutor with no experience in Washington, I thought it was important to surround myself with good quality individuals. The other thing that I'm proud about is some of the relationships that we have been able to build in office. We have worked very diligently to build relationships with members of our agriculture community, people like Farm Bureau and Mike McCormick there. Mississippi State, a major land grant institution that is so vital to what we're doing here in Mississippi. I mean, Mississippi has an $8 billion economic impact from agriculture, supporting our men and women in the military, working with people like General Bowles, being able to greet troops of the 155th as they came home from deployment, being able to do things such as help the Regional Counter-Drug Training Academy, which is located at the Meridian Naval Air Station, to make sure that we are securing funding to train law enforcement. And so we have been able to accomplish things. I was also proud that we were the first Republican freshman who was able to pass a bill out of the House of Representatives, and we were the second Republican freshman to have a bill pass out of the House and the Senate and to be signed in law by the President. Also have the opportunity to serve on the Ethics Committee, one of only 5 Republicans. I'm the only freshman Republican on that committee. And so I think that I have been blessed and that leadership has entrusted me with great committee assignments, and hopefully that I'll have the ability to continue to serve the people of Mississippi for the long term.
What's the one thing that surprised you most about your first year?
You know, I guess the one thing that has been most difficult on me and my family has been the travel. You know, I knew that I would be working in Washington, D.C., but you know, my previous job as a prosecutor was not forced to travel off. And so it has been an experience on myself and my family as we have had to adjust with me leaving out on Monday mornings. I take the 5:45 a.m. flight out of Jackson, and then not returning home until many times late on Friday evening. Then that time with your family becomes more precious, that you want to make sure that you guard that, so that when you're here, that I have a chance to spend time with my wife, have a chance to spend time with both my boys. And so, you know, that has been probably the most difficult thing this adjustment period of a year, is learning to be away from your family, and then making sure that you guard that time when you're here and that you're spending time with them when you return home.
All right, Congressman Michael Guest, thank you very much. It's always good to see you. And
thank you, Byron. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you. We'll be talking with you soon. All right, and we'll be right back. This week, lawmakers return to the Mississippi State Capitol and the start of the 2020 session. This session will feature new leadership, several hot-button issues, all with Republicans holding a strong majority. We talk with some political experts, journalists, and lawmakers about what can be accomplished in the next 4 months.
You know, I've been wrong before, but I suspect this session is not going to be as controversial as some people think it's going to be. There seems to be a consensus to do a teacher pay raise. I think that's going to be done pretty early on. And I think the other things are going to be kind of more not as big of things this session. I just think those things are going to occur in the second year of this term in 2021. Now, of course, with the stuff that's going on with the prison system, that kind of throws a whole monkey wrench into the whole thing. There's just so many issues that need to be addressed with the prison system. And what the legislature can do mainly involves money. And some people would argue money is the main issue, the lack of staffing and the safeguards that's been caused by the lack of money being put into the prison system. Some people would argue has caused a lot of these problems that we see going on right now. And that's something that the legislature may have to address early on. We'll see.
This is a 4-month session. It's the first session of a term, which means it's 120 days. The deadline to file bills is not until February 24th, and so depending on when the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor appoint committees, which I would expect will be into February, it's you know, there's a good question as to whether or not it will move quickly or they will be working behind the scenes with regard to legislation to address some of these issues. And so I would expect you may not see quick action, but there will be work behind the scenes getting it ready for quick action when the bill deadline comes, drop deadlines, and the committees start meeting.
Well, I think we need to make sure that we take a long, hard look at the current situation with the Department of Corrections. I believe that in prior years there have been some requests for funding that may not have been fully appropriated. We need to make sure that we make corrections a priority for the safety of families throughout the state, for the safety of personnel staff in prisons. We just need to make sure that we pay close attention and that we don't make any missteps.
If you did a special session within the session, and Haley Barber is who first produced that activity as a way to quickly deal with a crisis issue or an issue that had some immediacy about it. And that way, you, as governor, you can control and dictate the conversation, what the issues are that are going to be dealt with. Is it going to be shortages amongst prison guards and getting more guards in place? Is it going to be the salary situations? Is it going to be the living conditions in the prison system? Is it going to be about food service? Is it going to be about getting overall funding? Because since 2014, we have seen $185 million be removed from the corrections budget.
And so that definitely needs to be addressed.
It needs to be addressed and addressed very quickly, and you can do it a lot more expeditiously in a session within a session.
Outside of the prison and the MDOC, what's the next big topic that needs to be addressed and addressed quickly?
Some folks will say we can probably walk it a little slower, but teacher pay and what's going on with the full funding of public education is a big issue. I would, if it were left up to me, I would say healthcare. We've got to figure out a way to get coverage for 300,000 working poor, some adequate healthcare coverage, and also work to bring more resources to rural hospitals.
When it comes to infrastructure, confident that something will be done on infrastructure?
Well, we did a lot in the legislature when I was in, last session and the session before, and so I think mainly what's going to happen is the legislature is going to look at what has been done and where, kind of let things sort out a little bit in that regard and start looking at the application of those dollars to infrastructure projects, working with the Mississippi Department of Transportation, the two new transportation commissioners over there. And so working with the new transportation commissioners and the new Chairman King, I'm sure the legislature will formulate a plan and move forward on the issues. I do not see that involving a gas tax increase, and so I think they're going to work within what they have and the revenue streams that are flowing now and are expecting to come in, and I expect that they will make a plan from that.
Do you feel confident that something will get done when it comes to infrastructure here in the state?
I think the infrastructure concerns are a need just like corrections. Some things are just not going to wait. And while infrastructure has been addressed in prior sessions, that issue is not resolved, and it's not going to resolve itself. So yes, it will have to be addressed.
And when it comes to teacher pay,
same thing. I know that different political campaigns have taken stances on those issues. I certainly support teacher pay raise. We know that the educators want a raise and that they need it. So it's going to be a priority also.
A reporter being here, sort of covering the first few hours and days of this session. That's really my big question for most lawmakers is, where are you on a gas tax? Would you support it? And again, sort of, if you are for it or against it, it also depends on what it looks like exactly. So whether it's a full sweep statewide increase of the statewide gas tax, or whether it's that local option county gas tax increase, it's just going to depend on, I think, sort of where leadership falls on that.
Real quick, Medicaid expansion or dealing with healthcare in rural hospitals, what's going to happen on that issue?
I don't expect anything to happen this session. The first session in a year, a new term, is always sort of a time for leaders and new members especially, to get their legs under them. That has not been an issue that has been particularly popular among Republican voters in Mississippi, according to numerous polls we've seen. You do have Delbert Hosemann and some other prominent leaders who have advocated for some sort of Medicaid expansion in the state, but we'll see. I don't really expect it this session on that.
Because I do not expect to see that there would be Medicaid expansion. Governor Reeves ran on that issue. The voters of the state of Mississippi have spoken very clearly on that issue. I do not see that as something that will come out of the legislature, the 2020 legislative session. With respect to rural hospitals, I know that there are various plans in place to address some of the issues that are going on with regard to rural hospitals, and I expect the legislature will address some of those issues in the upcoming session.
Delbert Hosemann, as well as our newly elected Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn, have both talked about a teacher pay raise. That's something that is a priority for them, something that they want to address. They've talked a little bit about looking at some infrastructure needs as well. One big thing that Lieutenant Governor-elect has mentioned is transparency. Now, this has been something that obviously came up a lot during the campaigns because it was something that a lot of the candidates ran on, was bringing more transparency into the House and the Senate and just to lawmakers across the board. So he's kind of thought through this idea of making some of the committee rooms available on a live feed. So right now in the House and the Senate, there is a live feed available on the floor for any time that they gavel in and they're working. Now, it's not archived, but you can access it and watch it immediately and kind of see what's going on. So he's proposing this same kind of thing happening in a few of our larger committee rooms. Now today when we asked Speaker Gunn kind of his thoughts on that and if he would implement that in the House as well, he said, we're going to let the Senate kind of figure out the nuts and bolts of it and see how much it's going to cost to do that. But it wouldn't be something they'd be opposed to necessarily, but that they would kind of take the lead from them. So that's definitely one big issue that they're considering looking at.
The session is scheduled to run through May 10th. We'll be right back. A reminder, the inauguration of Tate Reeves is this coming Tuesday. We will be live starting with 12 News this morning, and we'll have full live coverage of the swearing-in ceremony on air and at WJTV.com. Thanks to Congressman Michael Guest for joining us and to you for watching. We'll be back next Saturday night. Until then, make it a good night.